You are listening to the Justice in Heels podcast with me, your host, Danielle Hayward. Join me as I discuss interesting legal topics with inspiring female legal professionals who paved the way for the rest of us. Welcome to the latest episode of the Justice in Heels podcast. Today, I have two amazing attorneys with me. So I just want to say welcome to Carlia and Nadine from Spöhr Attorneys. Welcome, you guys. How are you?
Good, and you? Thank you for having us today. We're really excited.
I'm also very excited to speak to you too. So can you both just give us a small introduction? Who are you? What's your hobbies? Tell us a bit more about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Nadine. I'm from a small town called Rustenburg, and I studied in Potchefstroom. I first did my BCom law, and then I did my LLB degree. I then went on to do my articles at a firm that specializes in property transfers. And I continued working there. I was there for 5 years, and then Carlia and I decided to open Spöhr Attorneys. So we're sisters-in-law. One of our clients actually said that should be our catchphrase, sisters-in-law. I love cooking and reading. I would say those are my two favorite hobbies.
My name is Carlia. So as Nadine said, we are sisters-in-law, but actually literally family. It's not a cool slogan that we dreamt up. So I'm originally from a small town in the northwest called Hartbeesfontein. And after school, I studied at the University of Pretoria. I did a normal 4-year LLB there. And after university, I did my articles at a firm in Pretoria, specializing in debt collection, evictions, and general civil litigation. But during articles, Nadine and I actually worked together for a little bit, and that's where we met and became friends. But eventually I moved to another firm, but we stayed in contact and remained friends. And eventually I married her brother. So that's where the sister-in-law slogan, that's how that came about. And eventually we decided that it was time for bigger things, and we started our own law firm. And that's where we are today. Yeah.
Wow, that's a very interesting story. And I really like the slogan sisters-in-law. I really think you guys should have actually used that.
We should take it in. It was so clever. We didn't even realize it. One of our clients said, but your sisters-in-law, that's like the perfect slogan. Yeah. So it's very catchy and clever.
Oh, I love that. So today we are speaking about a very interesting topic, and I think a topic that's becoming more relevant by the day, and that's antenuptial contracts. So can one of you tell us what is an antenuptial contract?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, I will. Okay, so an antenuptial contract, it's more affectionately known as a prenup from the movies. So it's a contract that you enter into before you get married. And so that contract then regulates or determines your marital regime. So when you enter into that contract, you are married out of community of property. So because it is a contract, you can stipulate a few terms within it. You can personalize it to what exactly you want that contract to do for you and for your marriage.
So I think it's also important to mention that although you can personalize it and mention anything you want in the contract, you can basically write anything there, but it's not to say that it will be effective. So let's say, for example, somebody who wants to put something there like if one of the partners were to cheat, then the other one will lose everything, basically. Can you please just tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so although it is a contract, there are certain rules that apply. So contract law is applicable. So you can't, go crazy and, put in all of these clauses that are not enforceable at the end of the day. And a rule of thumb with those types of clauses, or if it's against public morals, then you cannot include them. So a typical example is if you want to say that your spouse has to convert to your religion. That's the most popular example in textbooks that they always use. So that is something that is not enforceable. So if you include such a clause, that clause will be void. You cannot enforce it. Another one is, for example, if you want to include that one of the spouses has to stop working and look after the children. That is also something that it's against public laws and you cannot include that in a contract. So just remember when entering into this contract to, as a rule, keep it simple and factual and try not to kind of get carried away with this power that you have, because I think people think that because it's a contract you can include absolutely anything, and that is unfortunately not the case.
Yeah. I literally had someone who contacted me and they asked me, is it possible for me to state in our ANC that my wife is not allowed to color her hair? Otherwise, she loses everything and I get to divorce her.
Maybe they should reconsider their union.
Definitely, that's actually what I think.
Wanted to do with the hair. He was that worried about it.
Yeah, no, I had a laugh, to be honest. So can you tell us, how does one decide between an antenuptial contract with the accrual and without the accrual?
Okay, so a lot of clients come to us and they ask us, which one should they choose? Which one is the best option? But it's really not for us to decide. So the way that Carlia and I, handle that question is that we very thoroughly explain the difference between the two. So we make sure that they understand it completely. We give them a lot of examples as to what would happen if one of them should stop working, or they both should work throughout and earn a salary and so forth. So we put all of the facts in front of them, give them like the pros and cons in terms of both, and then they will also then give us a bit of background on their relationship. Could one of them maybe have plans to start their own business? Or do they have very stable income? Is it their plan that one of them should stay at home and watch the kids one day? That type of thing. So they then give us a little bit of feedback, and then with the facts, they then determine what is their need and what would work best for them.
Thank you so much for that. Then I wanted to ask, and I think this is a very practical question. Can you perhaps give us a little example of how the accrual is usually calculated? A very basic example.
So with accrual, let's first just start by explaining what accrual is. So accrual means that you share in what you accumulate during the marriage. And how that is calculated is in your contract, you have a starting value. And that is just very simply, we type in your name and an amount. So it's not, that the contract suddenly becomes this 50-page document and we have to list all of your assets and liabilities. It is just an amount that we type into the contract for each spouse. And for the example, let's say both spouses start on 0. That is actually something that is quite common for a lot of couples. I think especially younger people who, they are just starting to earn some money and, they want to build something together. So let's say for the example, both people start on 0. Then a few years goes by and the marriage comes to an end. Then we have to look at what is your end value. So let's say, for example, party A's end value is 100,000 Rand and party B's end value is 50,000 Rand. Then we look at what is the difference between the two, which in this case is 50,000 Rand. Then our accrual is then calculated is whichever spouse has less, they get half of that difference. So in this case, it would be 25,000 Rand. So accrual essentially does this, if that makes sense. So party A gives 25,000 Rand and party B gets 25,000 Rand, and at the end we sit at 75. So that is essentially what accrual means. I think a common mistake with that calculation is that people assume when you are married with the accrual, you suddenly own 50% of the other person's assets, which is not the case. Accrual is a monetary value, so it is a monetary claim that you have against the other party. So in essence, if someone has an accrual claim, the other party needs to pay them that amount. But if, for example, you do not have that money and you need to come to some sort of arrangement and say, okay, I need to give you my car to pay that amount, then, that's on you. That doesn't mean that automatically you own 50% of your spouse's assets. It just means that, if the spouse that has to pay the accrual has to give some of their assets in order to make that payment, that is on them. So that is, in a nutshell, how it works.
I think that helps a lot. I think a lot of people will actually enjoy hearing this, because that's also one of the questions that a lot of people have asked me, like, can you give me a practical example of how accrual is calculated? And now I can just send them this podcast. So that makes everything much more easier. So then I wanted to ask you.
Actually, Danielle, sorry, I need to just add one more thing with accrual, that is important if that's okay. So with accrual, people should just remember that there are certain exclusions to that calculation. So certain exclusions are there by law, they are excluded automatically. One of them, and the most common one I would say, is an inheritance. So let's say this party B, A and B that we're talking about. Let's say party B has a rich aunt, and this aunt in her will bequeaths 1 million Rand to party B. That 1 million Rand does not form part of your end value. That is something separate. It is like it doesn't exist for purposes of making that full calculation or doing that calculation. Another one is a donation between spouses. And the third one is if you are awarded a damages claim. So if you slip on a banana peel in Checkers and they award you, let's say 30,000 Rand for your pain and suffering, then that 30,000 Rand is also, something separate, and it is excluded for purposes of calculating your.
Obviously, the parties can also decide when they are concluding this A and C what they also want to exclude. Like they can add.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So that is also something that people can do. I think the most common exclusion that the parties kind of agree to between themselves is a pension fund. So people should just remember that you can agree to exclude assets between yourselves. They do not form part of that list of automatic exclusions.
Fantastic, thank you. So then I wanted to ask you, how long before your wedding should you conclude an antenuptial contract?
So there isn't really a time frame which you need to abide by. The most important thing is just to make sure that you sign the contract before the date of your marriage. So that's the most important thing. And one of the time frames we do adhere to, just as a side note, is after you've signed that contract in front of a notary, we must make sure that it is registered at the deeds office within a 3-month time period. But for the couple purposes, they just need to make sure that it's signed before the day of their wedding. So we usually say about, let's say, 2 or 3 months before the wedding is a good time to, get in contact with us, make sure that that is all, everything is in place for that. Because everything gets really busy closer to the wedding day. And I've seen a lot of times, the brides, they need to do like a dress fitting and so forth. And then they don't have time for meetings and all of those stuff. So yeah, the thing about it is we always get together and we, as I said earlier, we have a very thorough discussion and explain everything. Then afterwards, the bride and groom or the couple go and they discuss everything between each other and they make a decision and they give us an instruction. Then for us to draw up the contract, it takes a day, maybe 2 days. And then it's ready for signing. So it isn't something that takes a lot of time. It's just easier if they come to us a little bit earlier. Then you can tick off that box, the contract is in place and you can just focus on your wedding.
Totally agree with that. So, yes, sorry, Carlia.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, if you are in a pickle and it's the morning of your wedding and you realize, oh my goodness, I do not have an antenuptial contract, we can still help you. So preferably, obviously, do it months before, but it has happened where couples call us like the day before and they're like, oh my goodness, I forgot and this was on my list, and we actually managed to help them as well. So just keep in mind, we can do it on an urgent basis, but it's preferable to not do it like that.
Okay, fantastic. So then I also wanted to ask you, obviously there's this misconception that you cannot claim spousal maintenance if you are married out of community of property. Can you please explain that to us, why it's not like that?
So that's an interesting question. I think one must just remember that so maintenance would be in instance of divorce, if I'm correct. That is your question. So maintenance is something different from your marital regime. I think those are two separate matters to deal with. So when you get divorced, we must obviously deal with your marital regime and divide the assets accordingly. All parties can choose to settle and abandon their marital regime and say, listen, I know we are married with accrual and there is an accrual claim, but we settle on the following terms. That can also happen. But on the other hand, we need to deal with maintenance. And that is something that a court will decide, and a spouse is always entitled to ask for maintenance, and the court will make a ruling according to the couple's circumstance.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Then I want to move to a different topic, which is property law. So let's say you have now concluded your antenuptial contract, you get married, and now you decide you want to buy a house together, for example. So can you guys first tell us what property law services do you offer?
Okay, so we specialize in the transfer of properties, but because Carlia and I are both notaries, we can also do material bond cancellations. But yeah, our main speciality is property transfers. So whenever you purchase a property or you sell your property, then the center component of that is appointing a property transferring attorney. So they will facilitate everything necessary to register the property into the name of the purchasers.
So how does that transfer process work exactly? Can you give us a bit more information on that?
Yes, of course. So the main component to understand is that there is in like a standard transferring process. there's 3 attorneys that will be appointed. So it is the bond registration attorney, the bond cancellation attorney, and then us now in this example as the transferring attorney. So a transfer attorney is appointed by a seller, but the statement of account is actually paid by the purchaser. For that reason, a lot of our previous clients have requested as a buyer that we be appointed. So you can also remember that you can put that request in. It's not against the law to put the request in. But then from the moment that we are appointed to transfer this property, as I said, we are central to the matter. So we correspond with that bond attorney, with the bond cancellation attorney. We make sure that all of the attorneys have the correct documents in place. We also, for example, a bond cancellation attorney doesn't really communicate with the seller directly. We do that for them. We get all of the information and the papers on their behalf. We get that ready. So we then handle all of the administration for a transfer to take place. So we get in contact with the municipality to get a municipal clearance certificate. That certificate says that there is no monies due to the municipality and the matter may register. We get a clearance certificate from, for example, the body corporate to also say exactly the same. The levies are up to date. There's no outstanding amounts. The matter may be transferred to the purchaser. We then draw all of the transfer documents for signature by the purchaser and by the seller. Now, people think, a transfer is like a straightforward thing. It really is not. Every single file has a unique aspect, and you need someone with specialized knowledge to know, what must happen if there are strange certificates. It's called like a SPLUMA certificate, and you need to know in this area a SPLUMA certificate must be obtained. And when you read a title deed and you pick something up, it can be as simple as one word not adhering to legislation. Then you have to draft an application to rectify that word, or else transfer will not take place. The deeds office is very stringent in terms of rules. So you really need an attorney with specialized knowledge, because they need to read that thing, pick it up, and immediately address the problem. So it's very administrative, the process, but basically you get everything ready to put in a little file and lodge at the deeds office. And everything must be perfect in it, and then when that registration takes place at the deeds office, in terms of your documents, then it's in the name of the purchaser.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like a lot of work, let's just be honest. But I wanted to ask you, how long does this process take, give or take? Like, if you can give us a time period.
So usually, I think I speak for all attorneys and conveyancers out there when I say you usually overestimate the timeline. So you would rather surprise a client than disappoint a client. So we usually say it takes about 3 months, but that is to accommodate, any glitch or, something that might go wrong during the process. But we usually try to do it like within a month and a half, 2 months, but, stuff can go wrong, like Nadine explained, and, things pop up unexpectedly. You can be, 3/4 done, and then something happens and you really need to sort it out quick, and that can cause a delay. So I think, the rule of thumb is, let's say 3 months, but, our office, I can say we usually do it in, less time than that.
And I also wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for people who are first-time home buyers in terms of like the legal aspect that they should take into account?
You know what? The advice that I would really give a new buyer, it's something that very few people follow. When you go and you view that property, a lot of times, there's always like a joke saying, you know, I'm going to take my dad with to make sure the cabinets
The car, yeah.
working and so forth. And people don't do a proper inspection when they view a property. So there are actual companies that you can appoint to go and do a very thorough inspection of that property. Because the thing that happens, not a lot of times, but it happens too often actually, is that a buyer will, let's maybe say they take early occupation, or even after registration, they'll take occupation of the property. Then they see, but you know what, the geyser doesn't work, or there's something wrong with the geyser, and then they are very upset. Or, you know, let's use a better example. There is somewhere they didn't see that there's a cracked tile. Now they want the seller to pay for them to have these tiles fixed or whatever the case may be. Now, if you did a proper inspection when you viewed that property, and you saw, okay, in the kitchen there are 3 broken tiles that you want fixed before you take before registration takes place, then you put that within the contract. You say, I make this offer to you, Mr. Seller, for 1 million rand, but subject to the condition that I want those tiles fixed by the time that I move in 2 months' time. And then it is smooth sailing. We know it's enforceable, it's in the contract, everybody signed for it, and so forth. But now what happens a lot of time is people don't do an inspection. Then they move in, they feel that no, these broken tiles, it's unacceptable. Then they want to institute litigation and action. And it's something that could really have been avoided by just doing a proper inspection, getting the right people out, making sure everything works properly and is not broken, and so forth. And if you know that something is broken, to accept that. You know, the seller can also say, thank you for your offer, but I'm not going to fix the property. And then you can make an informed decision. Do I want to offer 1 million rand for this property as it stands, or do I not want to? So yeah, I would say do a very proper, like a thorough inspection. Don't just let your dad throw his eye.
I would also add to that is you read the offer to purchase carefully. Read the contract, all documents pertaining to the transfer. Read them carefully, because it has happened more than once where, you know, people just sign and they don't read, and there's, you know, something really important in there, you know, maybe pertaining to occupational rent or something like this that they have to fix, and, you know, it you know, catches people off guard, if I can put it like that, because now we are nearing the end of the process and we are about to register, and now someone picks something up in a contract that they actually don't agree with, and then, you know, there's not a lot you can do after that. So, you know, take the time. I know it's tedious and not nice to read, you know, all of this, you know, intricate legal terms, but, you know, take the time, read through the contract carefully, maybe also, you know, take the contract to your attorney or a friend or someone and ask them, you know, please just go through this contract with me and point out if there's any clauses that I need to, you know, take special note of. Because that can also lead to, you know, the situation that Nadine speaks about, where now all of a sudden people want to take action and, you know, start a whole litigation process. We could have been avoided if you maybe just read this contract. And there's a lot of money involved in these transactions. So, you know, you don't just need to sign something bluntly. Especially in a property transfer, because, you know, it's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of rands that, you know, that's at stake here. So you really need to make sure you understand 100% this money.
I think that's like very good advice. So can you assist with transfers of properties that's only in Gauteng, or can you assist like with any property all over South Africa?
No, we can assist anywhere in South Africa. We last year specifically, I think we did 2 transfers in Cape Town. We did one in KZN.
Northwest was the other one earlier this year.
Yeah. So yeah, we can assist anywhere. The thing is, it's not like a litigation attorney that sees the client. Well, today we also have Zoom for that, but you sit with the client constantly. As I said earlier, it's much more administrative driven, and you work on your computer, so you can do it anywhere. Those figures, like applying for municipal clearance figures that I referred to, most of the time that is done electronically on the system we use to draft our documents. So you can be anywhere and you can facilitate the transfer of property. Even with anti-nuptial contracts, now that I think about it, we have had a lot of queries from clients who are in Cape Town that say that the attorneys down there or the notaries are very, very expensive, and it is a lot better for them to just appoint us in Gauteng to register it for them, from here. So yeah, we can really work with anyone in South Africa.
Fantastic. So then I wanted to ask you, as this podcast is called Justice in Heels, I wanted to know, have you ever had a situation where you were underestimated purely because you are female?
That's an interesting question. I think it's a hard question for a lot of female attorneys because I think you go through some experiences sometimes that aren't so nice. But I would say I've definitely experienced a form of that, although not, you get these extreme cases where you want to tell people, listen, you need to report this person. But I was fortunate enough not to have gone through something like that. But I remember when I just started my articles, I worked at a firm that did a lot of debt collection, as I mentioned. And part of the debt collection process, unfortunately, is having to call people and ask them to pay their bills. And it's not a nice telephone call to make, but that is part of your job. You are the attorney dealing with this file. You need to, before you institute action, just take the time and make a call and put some pressure on this person. And it happened on more than one occasion. That a client would tell me, listen, just ask your boss to make this telephone call because he's a man and, people will maybe take it more seriously when, a man makes this call because he's an authority figure, and I think people don't necessarily mean that. It doesn't, I think it sounds meaner than they intended. So it doesn't always come from a bad place. But if you are a candidate, you already have no confidence in your abilities at all. And, a confidence boost during articles really goes a long way. And, it really, doesn't do you any favors with regard to motivating yourself to get up in the morning when you feel like your client doesn't have confidence in your abilities. And that unfortunately happened quite a lot, because we specialized in debt collection. So that requests, came up quite a few times. And my advice would be to just keep going and prove everyone wrong. You gain confidence with time and you gain the ability, to do your work with time. And it takes time and you need to not be so hard on yourself because it is a learning process, and that's why you do articles, is to learn how your job works. And, just don't let things like that get you down and, just get up every morning and go to work with a positive attitude, and with time you learn to deal with all of those things. And there were numerous times when Nadine and I would speak to each other and say, I can't do this, I'm gonna just give up and do something else, this is too hard, I don't like it, it's too hard. But you push through and motivate each other, and if we hadn't just kept going, we wouldn't be here today. And now we have our own firm and we're two successful women operating our own firm. And if I'd listened to that client telling me that I can't make that telephone call, we wouldn't be here today.
Oh, beautifully said, Carlia.
Nadine, from your side?
Yes, so I think I had a similar experience. One time, I remember this, the client was very blatant in his demeanor. Myself and another attorney sat in a meeting. Now, the other attorney was obviously a man. And someone actually came to see us regarding complicated questions about an antenuptial contract. And I was the only notary between myself and the other attorney. But the client really didn't regard me at all. When I spoke, he didn't listen. He would just start talking. He only spoke to the male attorney. He just completely ignored me. And I must say that didn't feel very good sitting there and just being completely, I don't know what to call it. But then
Regarded or ignored.
Yeah, not regarded at all. But then later, when he started asking the difficult questions, those questions you don't get often, the attorney wasn't able to answer them, but I was. And I could tell him, there was case law on this. This is what the court said. This is something that you can consider. And by just staying calm, remaining professional, he realized, what, she actually knows the most about this specific topic. And then the attention moved to me. So, and the confidence also, he had confidence in my abilities. So I think exactly what Carlia says, just remain professional, kind, courteous, trust your own abilities, and later people will see it. And I think that's it.
Both of you, like, for sharing your stories and for sharing your expertise. I for one really enjoyed this conversation, and I learned a lot. And I always learn a lot from you two ladies. So what I wanted to ask was, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
So we are on Facebook. If people want to get in touch with us on social media, you can just search Spöhr Attorneys and you will pick us up immediately. If you are getting married specifically, all of these pages on Facebook, where people kind of ask questions about getting married, and I know there's a lot of groups where people ask what should I do and what's important and so forth before you get married. We are on all of those Facebook groups as well. And then, if people want to contact us directly at our office, we are available on email. So my email address is Carlia, CARLIA, @Spöhrlaw, SPOHRLAW. My cell phone number is 083-587-3031. So people are welcome to call or WhatsApp or send an email.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Justice in Heels podcast. If you like this episode, we would love for you to share it with your friends on social media and tag us. As this is a legal podcast, here is a quick disclaimer. The views expressed in this podcast are solely the views of the individuals involved and not those of the firms, brands, or anyone else that we are affiliated with. Till next